Just one more hour until reinforcements, aka me, arrive to save the day. But until then, keep your eyes on the highway and keep on trucking with Jimmy Mack on Road Gang Radio, y'all.
Way, Phone Master Dre. This whole week, I don't know if people noticed, Michael Freeze was here on Monday. He, of course, was over in Raleigh. Our good friend Kevin Lindsay talked from the same place. But the man at the center of it all, of course, is the Braz. Robert Braswell, as he always does, joins us this morning. We're thrilled to have him. Hey, Mr. Braswell, Executive Director of the ATA's Technology and Maintenance Council. What is going on?
Hey, Jimmy Mack, great to be here from Raleigh, North Carolina. What's going on is our 2025 fall meeting. As you know, you've had some folks that have been here, like Michael Freeze and Kevin Lindsay. They've been participating in our event all week. It's our fall meeting and National Technician Skills Competition. We're continuing on today and tomorrow before we wrap things up, and we're all operating under a theme of ensuring trucking's future success. We had a lot of fun last night at the TMC SuperTech Awards banquet, where we gave away prizes to 27 different station winners and top 1, 2, 3 for both the TMC Future Tech, that's a student competition, as well as our professional competition. The grand champion was crowned last night. It was Matthew Sloan from FedEx Freight. So congratulations out to Matthew. Maybe we'll get him on the program on a future show.
Would love to have him, man. Are you having fun?
Well, I would have to say it's a lot of work while we're doing this. So it's a mixed bag. But certainly after it's all over with, you kind of look back and appreciate, that was a really cool experience. But when you're in the middle of it, you're just making sure the alligators stay where they're supposed to be.
I totally get it, by the way, hopefully on the side of the road and very few of them actually being blown tires. It's good to have you back, Robert, and good to see that you're in the middle of the action, making sure that everything kind of runs the way it should. Who do you have on for us today?
Well, today we're joined by Radu Mihai, who is the Corporate Fleet Manager for BURNCO Rock Products. Radu is also our TMC General Chairman and Treasurer for this year, and he's our top volunteer leader for the next 8 or 9 months for the rest of his term. He's been kind of steering the volunteer ship and giving us direction as to where we want to go with the council, both this year and going forward. But, before we get started, Jimmy Mack, I'd like to go ahead and just go over some of the boilerplate that we do. Each week we like to make a special offer available to our listeners, and this week it's our radial tire and disc wheel conditions digest manual. We're offering it for the special price of just $20 plus shipping and handling. If you'd like to order, call us now at 703-838-1763, or shoot us an email at tmc@trucking.org. Mention Radio Nemo, and you can get it for that special price. And moreover, if you're an owner-operator or a small fleet, and if you've got 100 or fewer power units, you can join the Technology and Maintenance Council for the discounted annual dues of just $150. And do that today. You'll get our 2-volume Recommended Practices Manual, along with many other good benefits that will help you create efficiencies and save money as a fleet operator or an individual operator. And as always, remind our listeners at the top of the program that any TMC recommended practices we discuss reflect the consensus of our members. We offer them as recommendations only, and everyone must first determine for themselves if they are safe and appropriate for their operation. Please remember that TMC doesn't endorse any product, person, or service, and the opinions expressed on the show are those of the individual and not necessarily the opinion of his or her company, nor TMC, unless stated otherwise. And with all out of the way, Jimmy Mack, I'm going to go ahead and welcome to the program Radu Mihai. Welcome.
Well, Robert, thank you very much for the nice introduction. I'm glad to be here. And let's talk about this week. We are having successful and very well-attended SuperTech and FutureTech. I personally was humbled by the level of knowledge in the room. It was quite one of those awakening moments when you think you know lots, but you realize you actually don't know as much as you think you do, and there is still a lot to learn. I'm also very grateful for these technicians that are along. A lot of young guys here that chose to compete. And Robert, can you imagine these fellas? They have their own daily jobs. They have families. They have friends, and then they still have to go home at night and prepare for the competition. It's time consuming, and they are doing an awesome job. Once again, I want to thank them for everything they are doing for us.
Yeah, Roddy, let's just set the stage a little bit for you because we know one of the things that's interesting is you are a Canadian fleet. That's the first for the council, I think, in the council's history. You're also from a vocational operation. You're in the construction, off-road kind of an application. There's a lot of unique things to your vocation that you don't necessarily see in over-the-road trucking. Kind of what's your experience in terms of working with a group like the Technology Maintenance Council from the perspective of a vocational construction type fleet?
Well, Robert, actually, thank you for this question. As you may or may not know, before my current employer, I was in long haul trucking, so I'm blessed to have both perspectives, right? It brings a whole new set of challenges. Our equipment is much more complex. The life cycle is maybe 3-4 times longer than in regular over the road. Like to give you a flavor, I strive to keep my equipment for anywhere north of 24,000 hours, which is a lot. Sometimes it translates into over 10 to 15 years of life. That brings its own unique sets of challenges, right? Like, just think about it this way. I still have pre-EPA 2010 engines in my fleet. It is difficult to manage all those generations of engines and platforms. Sometimes parts obsolescence ends up being a problem. And for a fleet like mine, we're not national. We are big enough to come to TMC, right? But still small enough to take a lot of value from this. Our technicians would have a hard time, and they will never be able to have the same level of understanding as a dealership trained mechanic. We also have to work on all kind of hydraulics, mixer truck components, truck pumps. They have to be a bit of a jack of all trades.
Yeah, and the other thing that's very interesting in a vocational operation, you keep your equipment so much longer probably than the average, let's say, over-the-road trucking company does. Certainly a fleet. Owner-operators will often keep their vehicles for many millions of miles. You'll have 20 years. That's not necessarily unusual. But that's also not unusual for a vocational fleet, and especially with all the work-producing equipment that's on the back of that chassis, you really have an economic incentive to keep that truck as long as possible. So you put a lot of effort into maintaining and specifying that equipment, don't you?
You are exactly correct. And even though I hate to admit it, I mean, when I come here and I see people doing oil changes every 60, 70,000 miles, to me, some of my trucks don't put those miles in 10 years. They do put the equivalent number of hours or more, which is actually worse for the modern engines and the after treatment systems. But yeah, to your point, we are faced with a different set of challenges. Corrosion is actually a problem, especially when we operate in the mountains in Western Canada. Corrosion is quite important, quite present. We put macrolide on our roads pretty much 7 months a year, right? So when you have a truck that's buried in that stuff, it's sticky, it's gooey, it doesn't want to leave your chassis. It's hard to wash it off. It's not uncommon to have frame problems, frame corrosion, especially on double frame trucks at the 10-12 year mark. So a lot of challenges, and these have compounded more over the last 10 years with the complexity of the power systems, or powertrains we have right now. We have sensors problems. The equipment complexity sometimes overwhelms our mechanics' ability to troubleshoot and maintain them. And let's leave it at that.
So let's talk about that for a little bit. So one of the big things we do at TMC is a thing called Fleet Talk. It happens on the first day of the event, and that's when all of the fleet attendees, or the equipment users, I should say, get together and talk about some of the problems they have without all the manufacturers and the vendors and the other folks that come to TMC. They're not in the room. And so it's a pretty honest and frank discussion of some of the problems that they're having. And, we do surveys from time to time. I think we had Jack Poster on the program a few weeks ago talking about some of the results of those surveys. And it seems like the folks here in person have been echoing the same kind of issues that, sensors are a real sore point when it comes to maintenance. In fact, we had a component life survey. We did one over the summer, and we asked folks questions about what was the expected versus the realized service life and expressed in miles for certain key high volume parts. Of the 14 that we looked at, only 3 actually were performing better than the equipment user was expecting. but in most cases they were not. And in many cases, it was considerably less than expected. The sensors, DEF sensors, NOx sensors, come particularly to mind. Perhaps only 30–40% of expected service life. And are you seeing that as well?
Yes, sorry about that. I seem to have some technical difficulties every now and then with my phone. But yeah, we are seeing that a lot, and especially when you operate in remote regions where you are far from PDCs and you have dealers that do not inventory parts, the cost of downtime, complexity of repairs, it just makes it very, very difficult to successfully run a trucking operation and keep your maintenance costs down at the same time. On the other hand, me as a relaxed company, I'm actually glad I'm not the only one seeing those problems. So yesterday for me was like a breath of fresh air. I just don't know, it's just something we're doing wrong, but I guess it's not just me.
One of the things that came up during Fleet Talk is that when you're, specing a sensor, you don't really have a lot of say in how you spec the particular sensor when it comes to a DEF system or a NOx sensor. And when the OEs are building out the truck, they're bidding out the truck as well. And what happens when it's the low cost bidder that gets the contract? Well, maybe that's part of the reason that some of these systems aren't lasting as long. But certainly there is an aspect to maintenance that is you can't ignore. There are certain things you have to do to ensure the best environment for those parts. And I think we're looking forward to having some extra sessions as we go into 2026 on the topic of specifying and maintaining sensors, right?
I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's a timely topic. Something needs to be done in this department because we suffer and we incur costs. Like, to me, this is one of the low-hanging fruits that could be addressed. I think we need more involvement from suppliers, and would sure help all stakeholders if they would listen a little bit more to the guys that actually use the equipment in the field.
And part of this, I guess, is the continuing progression towards a completely vertically integrated unit. Mac's been vertically integrated for a long time, but it's rather new concept for a lot of the other manufacturers. 25 years ago, you could spec every nut and bolt on the truck. It's getting to be, you have somewhat fewer options, right? Certainly not as many options as you may have had. I remember one OE told us at one time, they said, well, it'd be nice if you just didn't have 300 different shades of white you would like to spec for a paint, or 14 different places to mount an air dryer, make life a little easier in terms of manufacturing a vehicle. What do you think the trend for vertical integration is going to do to fleet managers, to fleet operations as we go forward?
Well, Robert, thank you for your question. And just for the record, with my OE, I don't have 300 coats of white. I only have 150. But, all joking aside, vertical integration has its good points. Technology is more and more complex. You actually need systems to talk to each other. But at the same time, unlike our friends in Europe, where most of technology seems to come from nowadays, we operate over a vast continent. And our equipment after 5 years doesn't just vanish into certain parts of Eastern Europe. And let's leave it at that. And probably being from around there, I'm okay to say that, right? We need equipment that's reliable. If it breaks in the middle of nowhere, we don't have a driver that is going to starve and freeze for a month, a year.
But it's getting to be to the point now where there are some speccing options that are becoming limited depending on the type of configuration you have on your vehicle. And maybe you're not able to specify, let's say, an air dryer that is sufficient for the operation that you need. Some of this vertical integration may be limiting your choices, but you still have to continue the mission.
Well, and thank you for the forum to actually say this out on the waves. We expect fleets, we need to have the ability to spec the components that work for us best. We need the OEs to come and ask us, hey, why do you think about this? Do you think it's going to work? If it does, great. If it not, why do you think it's not going to work, right? And more often than not, maybe not my fleet, but somebody else, a fellow TMC member, he will have a good explanation here. So why this doesn't work in our neck of the woods. So coming back, I guess to wrap up on vertical integration is good. It helps in a lot of areas, but we need to have a certain level of ability of fleets to spec componentry we want and need.
You're listening to Tech Talk with TMC. We're here at TMC's 2025 Fall Meeting and National Technician Skills Competitions here in Raleigh, North Carolina, at the Raleigh Convention Center. We're now transitioning to our educational phase of the meeting, and we've got a whole bunch of different educational sessions that are coming up. One of them that's going on right now is our future tractor-trailer electrical connector session. What fleets want. That's one of the topics that's been of, quite a hot topic, quite frankly. The idea that we need to have a successor to the J560 electrical connector that we've been using since the early 60s, mid 60s. It was pretty much ubiquitous by the 70s. We've been used to this. It's almost become complacent. The fact that when you go to hook up a tractor to a trailer, there's one connector that is going to be there and it's going to do a good job for you. But since now you have smart trailers and so much other electronics on board the vehicle, and the networks that you're going to need as the trailers get even smarter, a second connector, a successor connector, is going to be necessary. But the question is, what should that be? At present, there are about 4 different versions of a future connector that are out there. They're not all compatible. They're not all the same configuration. So it's possible without industry standardization, you could have some sort of connector chaos out there. It may be, and this is not uncommon in Europe, you may be able to share some experience in that, where you have 3 or 4 different connectors in the back of a trailer or the back of a tractor and the nose cone of a trailer to make all that happen. Hopefully that's not going to be the case, right?
Well, Robert, I sure hope that's not going to be the case. And if I don't know if in this case history can predict the future, but if we have to live with the next connector for the next 60, 70 years, we'd better get it right. And for those fleets out there listening to us right now, please get involved. We have been asking for input for a long time. We need voices in the industry speaking up. Here's what we like about it. Here's what we don't like about it, and also why we don't like it. Because if not, if we let this go, once it's upon us, it's here to stay, and we'll all struggle with it.
Yeah, I think the last time this issue kind of came up in the 90s when there was talk of a second connector, a standard second connector. And there have been other connectors. The ISO 3731, I think it is on a lot of tractors. Not very many fleets use it. Some do. But it's not something that's preferred. And certainly it's not enough to carry us into the future. In looking at this next generation connector, we have to make sure that it's robust, it can survive in the environment that we operate in, but it also has to have things like automotive Ethernet. It's got to have CAN bus. It's got to have a lot more capability to get all the data that's coming off of these smart trailers into the tractor and back and forth. Not to mention when you have longer combination vehicles, the need even increases beyond that. But without that standardization, you could end up having ecosystems of tractors and trailers that have to stay within their own brand network, so to speak. That might be an issue. It's something that we're not used to in the North American market when it comes to equipment. Another aspect of that, maybe in Europe, another difference too is, the distances are shorter. You have a lot more married vehicles, so to speak, tractor trailer. You don't really see as much of that. So this issue is particularly important. Sticking to the topic of networks, though, there's another session we have coming. This will be held on Thursday, and we have it. It's called Can Do. It's all about simplifying network communications troubleshooting across the controlled area network, or CAN bus. What's it like today, having to diagnose some of these CAN bus issues? Is it something that's getting easier? Is it vexing? How would you describe that sort of an issue in the maintenance department?
Well, Robert, it kind of depends on whose maintenance department you're talking about. If it's a dealership, I would say they are getting better, but those guys only have most likely one brand, one nameplate to worry about, right? And they have a lot of technical support and resources behind them. If you're talking about medium to small fleets, I think for us it's actually getting worse. We don't see as many after treatment issues as we used to, but this area is still an area we struggle. And as it gets more complex over time, equipment ages, I think we'll see more and more problems. So I think it's a steep hill ahead.
It's getting to the point now where you almost need an oscilloscope to diagnose some of these systems, and I know we're starting to teach that technique here at TMC's training fair for the technicians. We had a session on that about a year ago, I think it was. It was eye-opening, the amount of increased productivity you can get from some of these tools in helping diagnose these issues. It's amazing, but you have to have the proper training. You have to have the proper access. And it's not something you just turn over to the dealer, is it? Because there's just not enough points of service in the various OE dealer networks to take care of all the equipment that they would have to take care of here in the North American market.
You are exactly correct, and I think the only way to address that is through a stronger partnership, like between OEs, equipment suppliers, local dealers, and fleets. We all have to work together. Obviously, everybody has to make money in the process, but we all have to work together to increase the awareness and the level of sophistication. So our mechanics have the equipment, the tools, and the knowledge to perform these tasks, which are becoming more or less mundane.
Let's move on to another subject. Disc brakes was the topic of much discussion at our Fleet Talk session among the participants. We've been talking about trying to get disc brakes more, adopted in the industry. And certainly that's the case. I think a lot of the new builds, it's 30-40% of new builds have disc brakes. You're starting to see a lot more disc brakes on trailers now. But surprisingly, some of the fleets are starting to have problems with disc brakes, even though it's the fifth or sixth generation of this sort of technology, even going back to the 80s, where there were some issues with service life, warped rotors, short pad life, things like that. A lot of those issues were worked out, and generally speaking, when it comes to tractors, the fleets are reporting fairly good service with disc brakes. But when it comes to trailers, it's a little bit of a different story, huh?
Robert, that's exactly what I heard, and we kind of go back to the partnership between suppliers and their real customers. We sure do them good to go and walk some of the yards and see the problems fleets see. Like when you hear people in the Northeast talking about corrosion and the rotors rotting away, I'm sure there are ways to mitigate, maybe not eliminate, but mitigate the risk and make that problem appear after 10, 15 years. And by then, probably the rotor would be gone, not in service. And also the cost of replacing some of these components is something else. Definitely the performance is there, but costs are high.
One of the things that people were reporting is they were seeing excessive corrosion in the cooling fins of the rotor, particularly in trailers and applications where the trailers may sit for extended periods of time. And maybe that fleets become a little complacent because they have disc brakes. They feel like, well, I don't have to maintain them as much as I do S-cam brakes. And so maybe some of that maintenance is not happening, or maybe it's just a matter of the operation that it's in. But that's something that some fleets are looking at because, if you're not careful, you're going to end up looking at a $5,000 brake job, which is, far more than you're used to seeing for maintenance on an S-cam, for example, for a particular trailer. So, that's one of the concerns we're looking at with that. We have a session tomorrow, Disc Brakes 101, speculative maintenance. And here's one thing that we always try to tell people. If you're not good at S-cam brake maintenance, you're not going to be any better at disc brake maintenance. It's just as simple as that. There are some basic things you have to do when it comes to your specifications and maintenance. If you're not good at doing that with S-cams, you're just going to have problems with discs. So it's not a panacea, right?
You are 100% correct. And I would say, at least from my perspective, in our industry, there is a misperception out there. People think that if you spec disc brakes, they're maintenance free. Well, they're not maintenance free. There is no such thing as maintenance free unless it's something you throw away. Quite the contrary. If you don't do proper maintenance and proper inspections, it will come and bite you hard.
One other session we have going on, and this will be later on this morning, is proactive corrosion protection strategies. You touched on it a little bit earlier. Your Canadian fleet, You have a lot of operation in areas of the country where you're doing cold weather operation, 8-9 months out of the year. You have a lot of corrosive de-icing chemicals you have to deal with. Are there some strategies you think that you're doing in Canada that maybe would be more effective if were applied here in the States? It sounds like we don't hear as much issues with corrosion north of the border as we hear south of the border.
Oh, Robert, I would say we have our fair share of pain and struggles, and if would be one silver bullet, would be nice. Unfortunately, if there is one, I don't have it, or I've never seen it. It's a lot of work, a lot of repairs, a lot of downtime. You also have to put some thought and consideration when you spec your equipment. Make sure it's fine to spend a few $100 extra or even thousands of dollars up front if that gives you another 5-10 years of no headache.
110 task forces met on Tuesday on all sorts of topics, developing recommended practices, information reports, position papers. What are some of the things that came out of Task Force Day that you think are interesting for the listening audience?
Well, I would say when you have 110 task forces happening over the course of 8 hours in a day, there is a lot of information, there is a lot of brain power, a lot of smart brains that partake. Something that was quite eye-opening for me was the amount of interest and engagement and the need actually of participation in let's choose RP 628. It's critically important. People don't understand a whole lot about it. Even I thought I knew enough to be dangerous, but I realized how much I didn't know. I didn't know so much that I actually thought I was ahead. So.
And that deals with brake lining classification for aftermarket linings. The idea is the RP tries to establish some benchmarks for how do you judge the performance of aftermarket linings. With OE linings, there's the FMVSS 121 standard they have to meet, and there's what they call an RSD standard, vehicle test that they have to go through. But aftermarket linings don't have to go through anything.
And I would say to conclude or to build upon that, kind of a shameless plug for TMC. If you guys have a topic that's near and dear to your heart that burns our industry, do come to TMC, attend, come into those study groups, speak up, raise your hand, speak up, come up with a topic, be passionate about it, and we will award you one of those 110, let's say 111 now, task forces to actually develop a recommended practice that will help your company, but also the rest of us.
Well, that's about all the time we have for this segment of Tech Talk with TMC. It's another day and a half here in Raleigh, North Carolina. We'll be bringing more information back to you as the weeks unfold from this event, and we're looking forward to sharing that with our listening audience. With that, Jimmy Mack, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to you in the studios in New Orleans. I'll be back next week. And for next week's show, in fact, we will have Larry Rambo on the show. He's a frequent guest. He'll be talking about electric system specifications and maintenance. I'm sure he'll have some things to talk about from what we learned here during the week in Raleigh, North Carolina.
And by the way, Raleigh, North Carolina is once again, we are able to broadcast this show and this segment from almost anywhere we choose to because of the efforts of both Phone Master Dre and our good friend Robert Braswell, the longest continuing running segment on RadioNemo.com. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Jimmy Mack. We'll see you next week.
Yes, sir.